In this lesson, we're going to set up our document and choose our colors. Okay, so to get started here, we'll just go up to File, New, and I'm going to name this 03_ begin because that's the project, just kind of where we're starting here. And now I want to come in here and customize my height and width and my units. So this is going to be easiest to think of in terms of inches because we're making a poster that's going to be 11 by 36. So it's kind of a super long poster. It's going to have a very vertical orientation. So go ahead and change your units from points to inches. And then we're just going to come over here and type in that 11 by 36. And I do want to have a bleed, so if you don't have a bleed put in there right now, I'm going to turn this to a 0.25 bleed. So that's going to be one of the standard bleeds. Sometimes you might only do a 1.25, or excuse me, a 0.125, but it really just depends on where you're having this printed and what they require. So I'm going to be using a 0.25 for mine. Go ahead and say OK. You can see that the color mode is set to CMYK, and that is what we're going to be working in. So you don't need to worry about changing that if that's what your default is set to. So go ahead and say OK there. And now what we need to do is set up some guides. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my rulers. So we'll just go up to View, Rulers, Show Rulers. And if I zoom in here, I'm just holding down Alt and rolling the middle wheel on my mouse. You can see that this is exactly 11 inches wide and that I have the 0.25 bleed here on the edges. Now part of the reason why I'm doing a 0.25 bleed not only is to have that bleed there and have it a little bit bigger than normal, but also to help you visualize how big that 0.25 is as we're working here, because scale can be kind of easy to lose track of when you're working on a document this big. Okay, so we're going to come in here and let's create those guides. So if I just come over here to the ruler and start dragging out, I want to create some margins on the edges that are going to be about a ½ inch. So we'll just pull this in right in between the 0 and the 1. And then I'm going to do this on the other side, right in between the 10 and the 11. Then we can do it at the top between the 0 and the 1. And come down here to the bottom. Just pull this on down. You may want to zoom out a little bit. And then we'll readjust this. And we'll do this right in between the 34. Let's see here. The 35 and the 36 is where we want to go. So right there. Pull that down a little bit further. Okay, so once you have your margin set up, this is going to become just a lot easier for you to know. I don't want anything that needs to be red to go outside of that area. So that's going to be just kind of to give us a little bit of a buffer. And let's go ahead and take a look at our layers panel. You can see that we have those 4 guides set up in here. I'm going to go ahead and select all the guides and we'll hit Control-G to group them. And that's going to be our margins group. And I'm going to just go ahead and come in here and call that Layer 1 Guides. And we'll put all of our guides on this same layer as we keep working. Now what I want to do is create some columns. So I want to have kind of just a 3-column system here where we have, you know, just sort of 3 cells, and then we'll divide this kind of horizontally as we work down through it, but then things will line up vertically with our columns. So we have to do a little bit of math to figure out exactly how we want this to line up. So I like to do this in a very visual way. There's other ways of setting this up, but to me, this is the easiest for me to know that I'm getting it right. So to set up my columns, I first need to figure out exactly how much space I have from this guide to this guide, because I know I'm not going to place anything that is not going to be bleeding off on the outside of those 2 guides. So that means that this area right here, if I zoom in a little bit, is going to be exactly 10 inches because it was 11 and we took a ½ inch off this side and a ½ inch off this side. So 10 inches. Then you want to decide how much space you want in between your 2 columns. So, you know, if you just had columns set up like this, just sort of haphazardly like that. You don't have any kind of, space that's just automatically set up in between. So I want to create that by, having something that looks a little bit more like that. But just kind of me dropping those in there really quickly. These look pretty close to the same size, but this one looks a little bit bigger. So the mathematical way for us to do this is to figure out exactly how much space we want to be in this area here, then add it to this because that's going to be the same. So we know that, if we add this piece and this piece together, that's going to be how much we're taking away from this total length. So this space in between here, let's just go ahead and define that as 0.25. You can see that it's pretty close to what that bleed looks like. So an easy way to figure that out is 0.25 plus 0.25 is 0.5, and we'll just subtract that 0.5 from our whole length of 10, which is going to be 9.5. So I'm going to bring up my calculator. And so we know we're starting with 9.5 as the total area that we'll be placing things in. And then we just need to divide that by 3 for the 3 columns. So hit the division. 3 equals 3.1666667. So that's going to round up to 3.17. So we'll go ahead and come over here. And I'm going to create a shape that is that size. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and then I'll just click, and right here where you see the width, we'll type that number in. So just type in 3.17, and the height doesn't really matter as long as it's tall enough for you to be able to see it. So go ahead and say OK. And I'll just give this a color, just any color will do for now. And then I'm just going to snap that into that corner up there. And then we'll duplicate this 2 more times. So an easy way to duplicate it is just to click it, hold down Alt, and drag it over. And that I just did twice, and that gave me 3 of those. Then we'll select all of them and use our Align panel to get that spacing equal. So to use your Align, you can come up here, click that, and we'll just choose this Horizontal Distribute Left. And voila, you can see we've got a 0.25 margin in between those boxes. So if I dragged this down, this is going to be where my data is kind of going to go by. So to give me those guides, I'm just going to come over here and drag these out, and they are just really easily going to just kind of snap into that area for you, give you a very obvious place that you're going to be putting those guides. And now you can just delete your little shapes, and we've got our guides, and they're here. It's a very easy visual way to kind of get that set up. So now what I'm going to do is choose the colors for my document. So a easy way to do this that I have found, especially when you're working with infographics, is to find a set of colors that makes sense with what you're working with. And one of the challenges of choosing a cohesive color palette with coral is that if you just do a Google image search for coral, or if you've ever seen any illustration of coral or anything like that, and it's a reef, you've got so many different colors. And that's, the beauty of it. But we have to figure out a way to still make this cohesive and feel like, we've got something going on that feels like it goes together and not just, the whole rainbow. So what I decided to do was to use a photograph of coral and then just kind of pull some colors from that. So that kind of helps. So what I'm going to do is just take that photo and drag it in here. So I've just dragged that off of my desktop, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger that you can see it. Now I'm not going to be redistributing this photo, but I just want you to be able to see this part of the process, and then we're going to grab our swatches from this. So I'm just going to zoom in here, and you can see that I picked a photo that, it really only has 2 very strong colors, which is going to be kind of this golden yellow and this sort of teal blue. But there's a lot of other colors here too that we're getting, kind of these pinks, just from that kind of distortion of this being further away. And also we're getting some really dark kind of navy colors. And then we also have some really light areas as well. So these colors are very complementary. And I chose this photo just to help limit myself so I wouldn't be tempted to use every single color of the rainbow. So Let's go ahead and color pick some of these values. I'm just going to come over here, grab my eyedropper tool, and let's just kind of hover right over this area here where we have that gold color. And you can see that that color was added right up in here at the top. So if we want to add this as a swatch, we'll come over here to our swatches panel. It's just going to be that button right there if you don't already have that as a flyout. And then we'll go ahead and hit New Swatch, and that'll give us those values. Now, because we're designing this for print and it's going to be a 4-color print, we want to make sure that none of these are cranked all the way over to 100%, and that looks fine. Those are very, fair values. And if you wanted to, you could even come in and tweak those a little bit. If you wanted it to be a little more yellow, you could maybe turn that up just a bit, because there's so many different colors here. We've only sampled, a very small amount by using the eyedropper tool. So you can tweak them a bit if you want, but don't get crazy. So I'll go ahead and say OK to that, and that's going to be our gold color. I also want to choose kind of that cyan sort of teal color you see here, so we'll go ahead and color pick that. You can see what color that was up there, and if you're not happy with the color that you're picking, you can always just kind of keep clicking around until you find one that suits you a little bit better. And I'll just kind of keep going. I want this to be very light looking, so that looks pretty light up there. We'll go ahead and hit New Swatch, and I really like the way that that is mixing together. Maybe take a little bit of black out of it just to make it a little more pure of that blue, just the CMY. Go ahead and say OK to that. That's going to be our teal. Now I want to have that really deep navy color that you're seeing. So I'll just kind of color pick from this area here. And you can see that it's a lot darker than it feels whenever I'm color picking just from there than if maybe I'd color pick from here. It's almost going to be black. So I'm going to choose from this slightly lighter area, hit that New Swatch, and you can still see it's a great contrast between this teal and that navy. So that'll be perfect for us. Go ahead and say OK to that. And let's maybe kind of try to get one of those sort of reddish colors from over here. So I'll go ahead and color pick one of those. We'll hit that New Swatch. And I'm going to crank up the magenta on this just a little bit, just to make it a little bit more rosy. But it's still going to feel very muted, so that's perfect right there. I'll go ahead and say OK. So you can see kind of what we're working with here. We have just these 4 new swatches created. I want to get maybe one of these brown colors as well, so I'm going to kind of come up here where it's a little more saturated looking. We can color pick from any of those up there. Go ahead and hit the New Swatch. I'm going to back the black off of that just a little bit, make it a little bit more brown. Go ahead and say OK to that. And then let's try to get one of these kind of white sort of cream colors that you see here. So I just kind of color picked from that tip of that one right there. Go ahead and hit New Swatch, and that's really perfect. That's exactly the color I'm looking for, just something really very light. So I'll go ahead and say OK to that. And now we have our swatches selected. Now you may not want to work with 6 colors, but if you do choose to work with that many colors, we just want to kind of maybe pick 2 as our primary. And for me, that's probably going to be this gold and this blue here. And then maybe this light one also, maybe have, this as anytime we need to have something really, coming out and really maybe being on something that's a little bit darker. So I'll probably be working with those 3 throughout the rest of this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the photo. We'll delete that off, and you can really do that with any kind of a photo. Just make sure that the colors you end up with still feel like they go together. So now that I've added those to my swatches menu and I've got my columns and my lines set up here, we're really ready to kind of just start getting some of the rest of our information in here into our infographic. And that's going to mean that we're going to be needing some text. So I've already decided on the fonts I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using Adobe Garamond and PFDen. Now, Adobe Garamond is going to be a serif font, and PFDen is a sans serif. So I'm just going to type this in over here for you. And I'll just type in PFDen. And I'm going to make this pretty large so we can see what a 100-point type looks like in relation to this that you see here, just the size of our poster. So this is going to be one of our fonts, and I'll just duplicate that, drag it down, and we'll turn this one to Garamond. And I'm going to be using Adobe Garamond. So there we go. And this is not PFDIN, that's Myriad. It was just the default, so I'll go ahead and change that. And I'm actually using a compressed version of DIN for most of this. We'll use the just kind of more regular version that's just a little bit condensed, but compressed is going to be super, super condensed in there. So these are going to be the two that we see. I'll go ahead and change this for you. And the reason why I'm choosing these two is because I really like the contrast that's created between using a serif and a sans serif font. And really, sans serif has a tendency to be great for headers, and serif is a little bit easier to read, especially when it's small. So using a good mix of those is going to be something that we explore throughout the rest of this course. One last thing that I want to do is to create kind of an outside border that's going to come right up against the edge of my artboard, so that anytime I have things that kind of bleed off the edge, I'm still just looking at that area that's inside the artboard. So I'm going to just come in really quickly and create a few shapes, and we'll just really quickly make those, and then I can come in and just sort of fix them here in a moment after we have just gotten those laid down. So just really kind of quick and dirty here to get this finished up. And I'm just going to alt drag that one down so it's basically the same size, and alt drag that one over. And then I'm just going to zoom in really, really tight on the edge here and make sure that that's just kind of right there on the edge. So that's pretty much snapping to my edge, so pretty easy to control. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, you want it to be as perfect as you can, but you don't have to get down to that infinitesimal level for this, because this isn't going to be printed. This is just to help you get an idea of what your poster looks like, and without seeing all of the pieces that you may end up bleeding in the end. So anything that's going to be, you know, an edge bleed, you would not want to see that, because you want to see what it's going to look like when it's cropped. So I'll just kind of extend this one out here, just sort of to those edges, just to make that a little bit more pleasing of a border. And then on my layers panel here, I'm just going to make a new layer, and we'll select those pieces, and I'm just going to drag those into layer 2, and we'll call this outer border. And then I'm going to go ahead and lock those layers. So then anything we create, we'll create on that next layer, just kind of, I'll put that under there because I need that outer border to be on top of everything. So we'll be creating everything on that layer 3 for now, and then we'll go in and split them up onto other layers as well. But this is just kind of that initial setup, getting everything together, and in our next lesson, we'll start laying out the title piece here at the top for our poster.